Now, obviously, your ACT score has a huge impact on the colleges you're accepted to, where you end up going, as well as the kind of scholarship money you get. Because of this, it's important that you find an ACT test prep approach that works for you and helps you get your target ACT score as fast as possible. And today we're going to discuss exactly that. Aside from the traditional ACT prep approach of just taking practice exams again and again and again, repetitively, there's actually a lot more that you can do to improve your ACT score and do it at a much faster rate. And we at 5 Academy have compiled all of these additional test prep techniques in our simple 3-step process to master the ACT exam as fast as possible. The first step of the 3-step process is to identify as many of your weaknesses as possible. This could be ACT skill weaknesses, this could be weaknesses in using some strategies, this could be test content, any kind of weaknesses you have that are keeping you from your target ACT score. You need to identify them and work on ways to combat them. Again, like I said, those weaknesses are what keep you from getting that score that you want. And the best way to go about studying for the ACT and to get that improvement as fast as possible is to look at your weaknesses, specifically your weaknesses, and develop ways to make improvements one weakness at a time, as opposed to just taking practice test upon practice test and trying to improve your ACT score collectively. That's much harder to do. So here's how you can do this effectively. First, take a practice exam, and after you've taken that practice exam, go over it and look at each question that you answered incorrectly, understand why you answered that question incorrectly, and take note of the skill that's being tested in that question. For example, if it was an ACT Math trigonometry problem, understand where your calculation went wrong and take note of the fact that you missed a trigonometry question. And the more specifically you identify the skill that's being tested in that question, the better. So if it was about sine ratios, for example, then write that down, that you missed a sine ratios question. Because as you take more and more practice exams, you'll start to notice patterns in the questions that you're missing. ACT skills recur from exam to exam, and if you have a subject matter skill weakness that hurts you in one exam, it'll do the same in another. So you can use your practice exams as evidence of your weaknesses and find areas of improvement based on those mistakes that you're making. Now, once you have an understanding of these skills that you're having a hard time with, you need to develop a course of action to make sure you get those questions right from that point on. There's 2 ways to do that. The first way is to develop a strategy that helps you whenever you come across that specific question type. Maybe it's a mental trick that you have or some sort of mathematical trick or something that you have that works. The other way to combat that weakness is to learn the subject matter content that's being tested in that question or that question type. And you can do this by looking at our subject matter study guide, which is linked below and you can actually access for free. It covers all the ACT's tested skills and can really help you a lot. The more you do these 2 things, the more rapidly you will improve and see your score coming to fruition. Step 2 is to improve with practice. Now, I kind of already discussed the improvement process with our 3 steps to master the ACT, but there's one other aspect of the improve process that a lot of students really mess up, so listen up closely. And it has to do with practice exams. Unfortunately, a lot of students abuse practice exams and don't get as much improvement and benefit out of them as they can. And that's because students just take practice exams over and over again in the hopes of getting improvement. But that's not really how this whole process works. Practice exams are not just a way to get used to the ACT exam and improve from that understanding, but you also get an understanding of where your weaknesses are, as well as a chance to polish your strategies. And when you take practice exams, make sure that you do it with the intention of developing all 3 of these things, not just doing it to get used to the exam more and get a better feel for it so you can do better as you take more practice exams. Because that kind of prep strategy, it does work to an extent, but you can get a lot more improvement out of actually identifying weaknesses and using those exams as evidence of your weaknesses and trying to improve based on the weaknesses you identify in your exams. That's what really helped me make my improvement from a 21 to a 33, and it can do the same for you as long as you work hard to identify those weaknesses and make improvements based on those weaknesses. The 3rd and final step is to execute. So once you've prepped, you have to make sure that you're ready to execute and actually get that score that you want on test day. And there's a few prerequisites to making sure you can do that to the greatest extent possible. The first prerequisite is that you're at a point in your prep where you've been taking practice exams, and in your latest practice exams you've had a harder and harder time identifying weaknesses and finding those repetitive mistakes. So you have less and less mistakes and less weaknesses as you develop. And as you get to a point where you have less of those repetitive mistakes and weaknesses, that means that you're actually getting more and more prepared for the exam. And when you take the ACT, you should be at a point where you feel very ready and you have very little repetitive weaknesses and mistakes. Almost none, actually. Also, make sure you've learned as many of the subject matter skills, especially the ones that you have a hard time with or had a hard time with at the beginning of your ACT prep. And you can do that again, like I said, with the resource linked below. So how can you start doing these 3 steps right now? How can you start making that rapid improvement in this very moment? Apart from looking at the resources that I mentioned earlier in the video, you can look at your past practice exams and try to find as many weaknesses as possible in areas of improvement. Because just like any practice test that you take now, those past practice exams are still very strong evidence of your weaknesses, and you can use that evidence at any time to find areas of improvement and actually make that improvement with the procedure that I discussed in this video, just to develop strategies and to learn content as necessary. Again, the core of this process is to identify weaknesses and make improvements based on those weaknesses, and any way you do that, any way that you can follow those core principles of identify and then improve, you're making strong improvement, a strong case to get that target ACT score that you're looking for. So just keep doing that in any way possible. Alright, so that's all we have for today, guys. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and leave your questions and comments, and even your concerns in the comments below. Don't forget to check out our free ACT prep resources linked in the description below, including our study guide, our forum, and we have more videos on our website as well. So don't forget to check those out. You'll also find free practice exams there. And apart from that, guys, we'll see you guys in next week's video. Peace.